Welcome back to Go With Your Gut podcast. I'm Norma Fled, and I'm an integrative and functional nutritionist. And here we talk about everything related to gut health, especially as it relates to youth. That includes teens, young adults, and parents sharing stories of their children. So what I want to talk about today is gluten. Why are so many people becoming more sensitive to gluten? Why are we seeing more people talking about it, seeing more gluten-free products in the stores, more gluten-free options on menus? Well, that really takes us back to maybe our first episodes even, when I interviewed Quinn and she talked about how gluten caused more congestion. She was getting sick more often. And then we heard from Sophie, who shared how she got really bad migraines starting as a young child, only in second grade. So why is this happening? And that's what I want to talk about. There are many factors playing into this sensitivity to gluten. And these factors include how gluten is grown, also the level of exposure, and how our body reacts to it. And first of all, gluten, I should be clear, is a protein, and it's mostly found in wheat. And the wheat that's produced in the United States tends to have a higher concentration of gluten, and it's because it's a harder wheat. Whereas in Europe, we hear they have a softer wheat. So it's going to have a lower concentration of gluten. So here we have this higher concentration or higher exposure from U.S. wheat alone. Second, we also have that added burden of pesticides. And since 2006, U.S. wheat has been sprayed with glyphosate, which is in Roundup. And we used to think that glyphosate or Roundup was only used on GMO foods, which was mostly soy, corn, cottonseed. But really now, Roundup is sprayed on many more foods. It's sprayed on wheat and oats before they're harvested because they want to dry the grains out so that the mold doesn't grow when they stack them. Hence, the Roundup really is that antifungal, but then we're consuming it. There's also a lot of studies from the FDA showing that it's in higher levels, not only on those grains, but on a lot of the beans and lentils we eat. So even the hummus you eat has a lot of glyphosate. But here, just focusing on gluten alone and wheat production in the U.S., we're consuming a lot of glyphosate. And know that this is a chemical that's a known neurotoxin. It can damage our DNA. It also harms the microbiome. And when you're harming the microbiome, you cause this imbalance, increased inflammation that can lead to leaky gut. And this leaky gut increases the intestinal permeability, where we'll talk about some of these reactions that can occur and affect other parts of the body. So another known fact from 1996 to 2016, the use of Roundup has increased 15-fold. And that's why you might hear from older adults like, I've always eaten gluten, I've never had a problem. But really, this exponential increase happened more recently, like after 2000. And it increased by 15-fold up to 2016. Here we are almost 10 years later, and you can imagine that the use of Roundup or glyphosate has increased even more. So we have this increased risk to these chemicals, and really that is playing into this sensitivity to wheat. Now, if the burden couldn't get worse, one thing to note is that over half of what U.S. children consume today is ultra-processed food, more than half of what they eat. And that's because our culture is always rushed. We want convenient foods. We want to be able to pack it to school. We want to eat on the go. And so we lose that benefit of whole, fresh foods and consume more processed foods. And what this means is you're getting more wheat products because most of these ultra processed foods, as I said, are made of wheat. So you're getting this higher concentration of gluten combined with more pesticides. And there's actually an addictive quality to processed foods, as we know from a lot of the additives they add in the sugar. But then what we also don't know is that gluten itself really can feed into this addictive quality. You have gluten peptides, okay? So when we digest gluten, they break down into peptides. And these peptides actually cross our gut barrier. They go into our bloodstream and they can cross our brain barrier where we have opioid receptors. And it is known that gluten has an opioid-like effect. So it feels good to eat it, it's very calming, and it leaves us wanting more. And they found this in research that another opioid-like food would be like chocolate or dairy, but gluten is one of the major ones out there. And so this all means that you have a higher load of gluten in a higher concentration, making up over half of what children eat today. Plus, it has that addictive quality, and you can see how this just perpetuates itself and why it keeps increasing more and more each year. And this has created the perfect storm. We now have a higher or the highest rate of celiacs, which continues to rise, in addition to non-celiac gluten sensitivity, meaning they don't have celiacs, but they still are sensitive to gluten. So both are on the rise because of this chaos that's happening in the gut as a result of gluten. It's true that a person's current gut health can definitely predispose them or make them more sensitive to gluten than others. And yes, genetics plays a role, also the current health of their microbiome, and that's why differences occur between each other. But if you've ever heard of that expression, canary in the coal mine, where canaries were more sensitive to the coal mine, whereas people, we didn't see the effects until much later. And that's another story. But what I want to bring up is a study that I found by 6 different gastroenterologists. These gastroenterologists from University of Maryland, Johns Hopkins, they demonstrated that gliadin, which is a component of gluten, increased intestinal permeability not only in celiac and gluten-sensitive subjects, but also in non-gluten sensitive controls. Yes. So meaning we are all at some level sensitive to gluten. It's just that those that are more sensitive will show symptoms, whereas those maybe that it's asymptomatic, meaning you don't have symptoms. This can be a cumulative effect that happens over time and may not feel it till later in adulthood as inflammation in the gut that can spread to other parts of the body. And what I mean by that, inflammation spreading to other parts of the body, is that when you have inflammation in the gut, it releases cytokines into the blood. And these cytokines are immune messengers, and they follow the bloodstream to other parts of your body. And for some, this can increase inflammation in the brain and cross the blood-brain barrier. It can go into our joints. Some people have symptoms like arthritis, affect other parts of the immune system. It can increase someone's histamine response, like it did in my daughter Quinn, and she had more congestion and definitely got sick more often. It can cause migraines, skin issues, so many different symptoms. And so the way it manifests is unique to every person, and that's why it gets so confusing. Like, how is this related to gluten? And so I hope you're seeing this connection, how gluten affects the gut and how the gut really affects the rest of the body, gut health, that is. So we really want to look at why, even reducing gluten for all of us can be beneficial. And that's why for certain individuals that tend to be more sensitive, especially what I see a lot with those with ADHD or autism, even bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, I've noticed how going gluten-free had really helped decrease inflammation in their brain and improved mental health symptoms. So what's the answer, right? This is so confusing, and I don't want to overwhelm people either. Really, it's about step one, try to go organic as much as you possibly can, because know that chemicals in foods really do harm the microbiome over time, and it's a cumulative effect. And I know organic can be expensive sometimes. So if you go online and I should say all the time, it can be expensive. If you go online and look up the Environmental Working Group, it's EWG.org. And every year they update their list. They list the dirty dozen, and those are produce that have the highest level of pesticides. And then you will see the Clean 15, which will also list foods or produce that tends to be lower in pesticides. So it's not as important to buy organic. Like avocado is an example, some melons, citrus, some of those things, even broccoli, lower in pesticides. But berries, definitely high in pesticides. I highly recommend berries organic. And even in the off season, buying them frozen, maybe that can save money, but doing what you can most of the time. And we know that when we eat out, it's not going to be perfect. We can't be at a restaurant like, is this organic? No, it's not, probably not going to be. So this is not about perfection. Again, this is about decreasing the chemical burden. Our body is meant to handle a certain level of toxins, both from the foods that we eat, the air we breathe, but we want to lower the burden. We want to decrease that load on our body, and especially in kids. You know, they have more sensitive bodies, smaller bodies that, chemicals have a greater effect. And really, the younger a person is when their microbiome gets hit, the greater effect it has on their life. But things can still be done, and my family, my kids are living proof. So second thing I want to bring up is decreasing the gluten burden. So for those of you that notice sensitivities when you eat, you have different symptoms, you might want to try gluten-free for a month. Like, let's experiment and see what that's like. There's plenty of gluten-free options out there. But for those without symptoms, really think about, gosh, how much gluten am I eating? A lot of people, they'll have cereal or bagels or toast for breakfast. There's gluten. Sandwiches for lunch, pasta for dinner, crackers for snacks, granola bars for snacks that have some gluten as well. So they're just getting gluten all day, every day. And especially when it's non-organic, we're really, really pushing it. And I've even lately, this Belvita snack has become real popular. They're called Belvita biscuits, and people are eating them for breakfast. And really, remember, they're, even though they have fiber, it's really just white flour mixed with oats. And since it's not organic, there will be a lot of chemicals. It's still only 2 grams of fiber, and it's the equivalent nutrition of even eating oatmeal cookies for breakfast. So a lot of food, especially processed food, is kind of in a disguise, like, ooh, whole grains, healthy for breakfast. Read the ingredients. You'll see they'll say wheat flour, which is white. They won't say whole grain. And usually there'll be 2 forms of sugar. There's syrup, rice syrup, whatever it might be. So try to take a step back and ask yourself, what would be some whole food, gluten-free sources? So not saying you need to go gluten-free. If you're feeling good, you don't have symptoms, you're in good health, it's really about reducing the load. So how about at breakfast? Sometimes you're having hash brown potatoes. You're having even sweet potato fries with eggs, avocado. And things can be quick also. You can use gluten-free bread, avocado toast with eggs. So different options are out there. Lunch, doing more soups, really salads, more vegetables, snacking on more vegetables and fruits and nuts and seeds, not feeling like you always have to go to crackers or feeling like you always have to have a sweet with every meal. Do we really need a dessert? Those are more occasional foods. Our body doesn't really need that much sugar, and the more sugar we eat, usually the more we crave. And we've already talked about gluten, how the more you eat, also the more you crave. And my daughter Quinn even shares that, how she would have like what she called gluten brain, which she would start to have gluten again, she couldn't stop. And then when she did take a break from it, it was tough the first 2 weeks, just kind of getting used to that feeling of not having gluten. So long explanation there, but I hope that gives you just some things to ponder, really to have more awareness of, gosh, how could I balance out some of this gluten? And don't forget about gluten-free starchy foods like not only potatoes, sweet potatoes, winter squashes like butternut squash, but also quinoa and rice, other gluten-free grains that you can mix in, really to again, decrease the gluten load. And third, finally, I'll just say that again, pay attention to your gut health. Pay attention to your symptoms. How is your energy? How is your stomach feeling? Are you getting headaches? Do you have fatigue? How is your focus? Do you feel like you have brain fog? All of these different things that to pay attention and how food might affect how you feel. And if you need more help, seek out the help of a functional medicine nutritionist, or doctor, naturopathic doctor, dietitian, those that really practice functional medicine and really get to the root cause. And so I hope all of this resonated with you. I hope this gives you an idea of why people might be reacting to gluten more and why it is coming to the surface more. And I'm glad there is this awareness, but we also don't want confusion. And one thing I'll also say is even be aware of overdoing gluten-free products, like gluten-free crackers, gluten-free bread, gluten-free cereal. You still need those whole plant foods, right? You still need butternut squash and sweet potatoes and fruits and vegetables, because the microbiome, remember, they like to eat fruits, vegetables, and fiber, and that's how we keep our healthy microbes going. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please leave a comment below or head over to my YouTube channel if you want to start a conversation there. And until next time, be well.